son of Albatross.
Yes, he's right over on that lake road, Saratoga Lake.
Yeah.
It was, that was the original. That's where he lives too.
Yep, that's correct.
I can't hear it anyway. All right, I have 12:32. So I can start with introductions at least, and then it will be recorded. So if anyone's late, they can always watch the recording. So hello, everyone. Welcome to today's Farmland Leasing Workshop. I'm Tori Roberts, the Conservation Project Manager at Saratoga Plan. Saratoga Plan is an accredited land trust whose mission is to preserve the rural character, natural habitats, and scenic beauty of Saratoga County. And hosting this workshop with me today is Nicolina Fothi of Cornell Cooperative Extension. She might be in your top left corner. And the workshop today is funded by New York State Department of Ag and Markets and the American Farmland Trust. So today we have Dave Wood from Edeld and Tweed Farm, a dairy farm with approximately 1,600 registered Holstein cows, 1,800 heifers, and Mr. Wood additionally raises crops on 3,300 acres of land and has been farming in Saratoga County since the 1970s. Mr. Wood received a BS in agricultural economics from Cornell University and worked for Cornell Cooperative Extension in Saratoga County for 36 years in both agriculture and administration. Also with us today is Nicole Tamel, a regional farm business management specialist and team leader for the Cornell Cooperative Extension, Central New York Dairy, Livestock, and Field Crops Program. Ms. Tamel works for non-operating landowners and farm families on land valuation. She aids with identifying rental rates, land types, and leasing agreements, and navigating land tax specifics. Nicole received a master's in agricultural education from North Carolina State University. So as a reminder of some of our Zoom rules, please keep yourself muted unless you are asking a question, and you can ask a question by unmuting yourself and speaking or by putting them into the chat. And Nicolina and I will both be monitoring the chat. So if you're also another thing is if your connection seems weak, please take your video off as it can slow the Zoom call down. So now, without further ado, I will turn it over to Mr. Wood.
So I'm on, is that it?
You're on.
Thank you for inviting me. And now do you want to ask me those questions or do you want me to just go through them?
You can just go through them.
Just go through them? Okay, I'll have to use my cheat sheet here to get them in order. But they're looking for my experience and you just heard some of that. I grew up on a dairy farm in DeRuyter, New York. My brothers, I have two brothers and one is still there. And we were the fourth generation. So leaving the farm, I did that because there are other brothers that may be there to take it over, which did happen. So after 4 years at Cornell, I got a job in Cornell Cooperative Extension, and I was hired in Saratoga County that fall. So I've been in Saratoga ever since the fall of '63. And one story I tell, which wasn't on the questions, and maybe I shouldn't divulge this, but it may be of interest. After I'd been here a few weeks or a couple months, I didn't really know any girls here. I just didn't, because I was brand new to the area. So I was making a farm call one day, and he was Frank Arnold. And I knew that Frank Arnold had a daughter at Skidmore. So I said to Frank, I understand you have a daughter here, and maybe you'd like to introduce me to her. Maybe she would be able to line me up with somebody. Oh, don't do that, he says, just ask her yourself. So the family, her mother especially, was rather concerned about that comment. But anyway, I got stuck in his field and I was late getting back to the house and she was just arriving back from Skidmore. So anyway, that's how I met. And I tell her I've been stuck here ever since, but that's kind of the case. I've been in Cornell Extension all that time. We got married the following year and we moved into a nice house here in West Charlton with 100 acres or so. And that's where it all started. So we had a good start. That's an easy start to have. The kitchen needed a little updating. There was a hand pump for the water. So you can imagine what the rest of the house was like. It was good, it was solid and everything. But anyway, that's where we started. So I had a few difficult financial years paying for her college education of $3,000 and my salary of $5,000. It meant it was kind of a challenge, but still we made it through. And Skidmore was good to me, giving me some time to pay for that. So that's kind of where it all started. So once we were married, we had a child in a few years and Connie started teaching. So I couldn't start calves until 1970, but that's where it started. So now we have too many cows and we don't have enough land. So I do rent probably 2/3. I didn't do the math on that, but I think we have 400 or 500 of our own, and we use, it's over 3,000 acres. FSA says 3,400, something of that nature. So the rented land is a big benefit to us. I think I have in the range of 50 to 60 or maybe a little bit more landowners that we work with. And we have annual leases, well, 5-year leases in order to give them the benefit of the ag valuation. That's probably the biggest benefit that our landowners get renting from a farmer. So if they're a farmer, we can offer that benefit to them, and that really reduces their taxes. So that's the primary thing that we do as far as the rental arrangements, is to use that ag value assessment. And oftentimes I'm willing to do the work of going to their assessor and making sure they have the lease on hand and all the other things that they need, just so everything is up to date. Most of the people, well, it goes about 50-50. Some people like to do it themselves. Others like to have me do it for them. So either way is fine with me. The other thing that's really good about land, if the people are willing to let you do the rotations. So once you have a hay crop there, hay isn't worth too much after a few years. I mean, it's still good hay, but it's not the nutrient and the high protein of alfalfa and all. So I like to keep it just 4 or 5 years in hay and then rotate back to corn and leave that a few years and then go back into hay again. And we, of course, pay all the costs of that. So that's another consideration. If people are not willing for that, then the arrangements are a little bit different, because we could use that field for heifer feed, but not the cow feed. So all of that is kind of the way we do it. It just kind of happens. A lot of people contact me knowing that we rent land and ask if we would be glad to do it or able to do it. And usually it's a yes. I like it if they're within 10 miles. Some of our land is out about that far. So the closer, the better. And of course, the better the land, soil types, the better. If they're not quite good enough drainage wise, we will establish the drainage. So last year, I don't know how many feet it was, but we spend a lot each year putting in drainage on different fields, as long as we know we're going to have it for a period of time. Can't be an annual thing because there's quite a capital investment there to put that tile drainage in. But most people appreciate it. It certainly improves their land, and it's going to be worth more in the future to them if the farming part or that lease doesn't continue forever. Well, those are some of the things I'm thinking of. Was there something else I missed or you're looking for information on?
When with your land lease agreements, do you have a generalized agreement for all of your landowners, or do you kind of specify it per that whatever the land and the usage is going to be and the needs of that landowner?
Well, I have kind of a standard legal or lease contract. It's short, just a couple of paragraphs. I don't believe in a lot of words. If somebody is going to disagree with you, they're going to disagree. That's fine. If we get started and things aren't working and they want to stop, that's fine with me. I'm amiable and willing to work anything out. But yes, I have kind of a standard lease form that it gives their name and address and location. And I like to put the tax number on there too, just for, it's a lot easier to remember it that way if it's on the lease itself. So different people are all different, and I'm willing to work with them as best we can. And it seems to work out pretty good.
What would you think is one of the biggest issues that you run into with like leasing land from other people?
Well, sometimes I'm surprised by how wet the soil really is. I should have known that to begin with, and if that's the case, then hopefully it's a long-term lease and I can do the drainage on it. I just got one last year. Well, it was a year before, actually. So last year we put in, I don't know how many thousand feet of tile, and it still isn't drained as well as it should be. But we'll keep working at that. And I worked with Soil and Water Conservation. They need to be involved and approve whatever we're doing so that we're doing the right thing for the land and for the landowner. Mhm.
How big, when you look to lease land, I mean, the soil quality type, but is there like a certain of acres that you look for?
No, the kind of the bigger the better, and especially the bigger the fields, the better. But sometimes we get down to kind of 10-acre pieces because they've got to have 10 acres or more. And it's got to fit the ag assessment rules. So normally the fields or the land is 20 to 50 acres, something in that range. Some of it's 100. So all that is good, and we take all that into consideration, especially allowing them the ag district valuation. Mhm.
You talked a little bit about involving the Soil and Water Conservation District. Could you explain how they help you and a little bit more about how you interact with them?
Well, there's all kinds of conservation kinds of programs out there through the federal and state programs. And we need to work with all those people because we want it to work the best for our business, and we want it to work best for everybody conservation wise. So yes, we work with the most direct people when we go to tile something would be the Soil and Water Conservation Service. So we work with them first just to make sure everything's going to be okay. We don't want to put tile in someplace we shouldn't have. That did happen. So we had to adjust our plans, but I'm willing to do that. Does that answer kind of? And I report everything through the FSA office. So they always know all of our fields, all the locations of them, and the crop that we have there for the year. Yeah. Takes a long time to satisfy all these offices, but it's worth it. It puts us in the right position.
When you go to submit the information, you go to the towns to submit that, correct? Like the tax information for the ag assessment?
The assessors, occasionally I go in person. And once I go in person, then I probably do it online. But either way, I've just done some online this year. And then I scan the documents and send it that way. But I'll go in person if it seems appropriate, especially for the first time.
Now for your land leasing, I know that you had mentioned that you do a lot in Saratoga County, but I would assume based out of where you are in Charlton, that 10 miles, do you get outside of the county as well when it comes for your leasing?
Yeah, we do. We get into Montgomery County and Schenectady County.
And have you noticed any difference working with landowners outside of your county lines?
Not really. I think probably, well, I shouldn't say I'm a challenge to those people, but to the different offices, but they don't begin knowing me as well as people do here. But yeah, it's a good experience. I like to go there at least one time to meet with people, to get an understanding of who we are and what the contacts are. And that all seems to work out pretty well. Yeah, and then if they know something I didn't know, that's a good time to find out.
What is your biggest recommendation for people who may be looking to rent or lease land for the first time? Or even if they've done it several times, what's your biggest word of advice?
Well, working well with the landowner. I think being upfront with what you need and what you'd like to do with it, and making sure that's going to fit in their plans. And 9 or more times out of 10 it does. But I think it pays to go over that ahead of time. So that there's just no surprises. I would say that's the biggest thing. No, there's probably others too. I'm not coming to mind, but yeah, working with people, it's all about people, not the land. It's the people that you need to work with. Mhm.
Other than word of mouth, how do you find people to lease from?
Well, I guess I have made some contacts. It's pretty rare. It really is. Because I've been doing this for so long that I didn't start needing much land until in the 80s because I started raising calves in 1970. So by the time it takes a while to raise those calves and then sell them as heifers to get some cash to replace the heifers and get a few more. So that growth factor was occurring for well into the early 80s. So by 1985, I think I had 35 cows I'd leased out on a farm, plus about 35 heifers. So that's when I bought the farm next door. And that farm was in my wife's family originally. So I knew them, I'd been working with them every week or daily. I was buying feed from them to feed my heifers, and I was doing their taxes and other financial sorts of things for them. So I knew them very well. And excuse me, I'll get that phone. So I think all that worked out pretty well. And then I had those cows, and then I bought 50 cows along with the farm. So the first year I was selling milk, we had 85 cows or so. And then it just kept kind of growing from there. And I was probably a little aggressive in buying some herds or that sort of thing, which I did. Some local herds I purchased as they were going out of business. And then just buying more heifers. And anyway, it happened that last year I bought about nothing. And I promised myself I won't buy anything this year either, cow-wise, because we can't hold anymore. We're selling, I think it's today, tomorrow, a load of 30-some cows ought to be leaving. And that will help our milking operation. Because once we get over 1,400 in milk, it's pretty hard in our old parallel. It's not parallel, it's before that milking farm. We built I should also say that we bought the farm in 1985. And then in 1988, we had a fire. And that burned the milking facility, and it did some of the free stalls, but we lost quite a few animals, and we lost the parlor and that whole thing. So in deciding to stay with it, we were renting a farm nearby to put our cows, and some other friends took some cows for a while. Well, we built a brand new parlor, but it was a double six. And the herringbone, that was the standard then, so we put in a double six parlor. Well, a few years later, I realized it wasn't going to quite do it, so we doubled it to double 12. Then I added a few on the end to be at 14. Then we went to the other end and added 4 more. So now we have a double 18, but it's still the same type parlor that we built back in 88. So it's not the most efficient. It works. I'm ready to spend $5 to $8 million on a new parlor, which is what it would cost. So anyway, that's the way we got into our farm, and that's where we are today with our 1,400 being a limit on the number of cows that we can put through there.
So we had a question come into the chat, and it says, if the land is compromised by a number of fields with trees and hedges, I assume you don't want to remove those hedges to make those fields bigger to utilize larger machinery, or is that something you would consider?
That's something I would consider.
Okay.
But it all depends on what you would have after you've done that. If you have nice sized fields and it wasn't too far away, and the hedgerows weren't too big, I guess. But yes, we've done that on several locations.
Oh, well, Dave, thank you. I don't know if anybody has any more questions they'd like to ask Dave about his operation and what he's done or things that he's found along the way. And then we can get into letting Nicole talk a little bit more about those documents and what to look for and possibly what to put in those leases. I'll give everybody a minute.
Don't
All right.
hesitate to Any question is fair game.
Will do. Well, thank you, Dave. I'm gonna switch it over to Nicole and I will get your PowerPoint ready to go here.
Great, and I am having some unstable internet today, so I am on my not on my video, so
Not a problem. Okay, share screen. Where did it go? Hold on 1 second. Oh, there it is. I had to scroll down. Good Lord. What a day. All right. Just let me know when you want to switch them, Nicole, and I'll run it from here.
okay. Actually, I see that Laura's throwing in the chat how to determine the rental rate. And who determines this cost. We're actually going to talk about that, Laura, in my PowerPoint. And I'll give you some helpful tips on how we determine that. Obviously, it's not a perfect science, but I will give you some information for that. Okay, so welcome everyone. Thank you, Dave, for going through as an operating rent person. Thank you very much for doing that, because a lot of our non-operating landowners may have lots of questions what happens on the other side for the folks that are actually renting the land. So thank you, Dave, for doing that and sharing your expertise. As Tori mentioned earlier, my name is Nicole Tamel, and I am the Farm Business Management Specialist and Team Lead for the Central New York Dairy Livestock and Field Crops team. We cover 8 counties, Saratoga being one of them, and also Montgomery County, which Dave did mention earlier. So Nicolina, if you'd like to forward. So that's me and my family. I actually do live in Montgomery County. So I live in Fonda, and I fairly frequently visit Saratoga County and do programming up there as needed by the team at CCE Saratoga. So I'm heavily involved in agriculture. My husband and I do own a farm in Montgomery County. We actually do rent some of our land to some crop farmers. We do not do crops ourselves. We pasture a lot of our cattle, but our good crop ground, we actually do rent to crop farmers. So I can give you both perspectives. And that's me. So this is always in my PowerPoint, so we can just slide right through that. So what are we going to learn today? So the objectives of today are how to determine an appropriate rental rate for farm property, where to find those current farmland sales in your area, and also important lease information. Basically, what do we need in a lease to make it valid for folks that are non-operating landowners, so that you can use the RP 305, which we'll talk about in a little while. Okay, so quick question here. How much knowledge do you have on the lease rates or facilitating a lease agreement? So I'd like everyone to put in the chat box 1, which is none at all, 2, a little bit, 3, moderate, 4, fairly knowledgeable, or 5, very knowledgeable. And I think I'm missing a question on that, but that's okay.
Looks like we're getting a lot of 1s, which is good.
Yeah, great.
Why we're here.
That's right. Fantastic. All right, so I'm glad to know that folks are in the right place. And of course, after this meeting, you're more than welcome to reach out to me, Nicolina, as well as Tori, have my contact information, and I can go one-on-one and visit with you if you have any questions. So thank you all for joining. I don't know how that got flipped around, but question number 2 is, who are you? Are you a landowner looking to lease, or are you a farmer looking for land to lease? So are you number 1 or number 2? So lots of people are landowners looking to lease. So lots of times we call folks that are landowners that are looking to lease, I'll refer to you as non-operating landowners. So that means you're not operating your own farm. You may not be doing that. So you would look to someone like Dave to come in and work your land. So you want to go to the second one, Nicolina? All right. So the first thing we need to do is we need to talk about farmland rental rate determination and how exactly we do that. And there's really 6 key pieces when we're looking at farmland rental rate determination. And this is something that has been developed and is pretty tried and true pre-COVID pandemic. We're actually working on a survey currently throughout the state of New York that is going to give us some better farm rental rate determinations. A colleague of mine and I received a grant through the New York State Farm Viability Institute to try to capture some of this information. In Iowa, they have a fantastic land rental rate survey. In New York State, we really don't. So we are trying to get some more information for non-operating landowners because there are a tremendous amount of people out there searching for this information. So what we are looking at is, one is the market rates. We are going to talk about the rule of thumb. We are going to talk about our ownership costs. We're going to talk about non-financial objectives, other variables, and of course, making it official. So that would be your lease agreement. So the first question is there a market for your land? Is there supply and demand? So if so, who's the competition? Are there farmers around vying for your property? Are you getting knocks on your door asking for you to lease your property? Or is there an ample amount of property around that there really hasn't been those traditional land wars? If you go to different pockets of Saratoga County or Montgomery County, out into Herkimer and Otsego County, there's pockets where people will actually fight over land. And with that being said, that is going to impact the overall price in which a non-operating landowner would receive. The second thing is the potential profitability of the land. So how profitable is that land when it comes in terms of crops? So is your land suitable for crops, or is it just pasture land? Some pasture land is very good, but the only way we're going to be able to determine that is if we do look at our soil surveys through the NAS Agricultural Statistics and Soil Surveys, which we can get from the Soil and Water District. So we're going to look at the profitability of your land. I've actually had folks call me and say, I want to put corn, I want to rent this ground to my neighbor, but I want to put corn in it. And unfortunately, their ground is not suitable for corn. Their ground is very heavy clay, and it does not have the growth potential. So we have to look at the profitability, the vitality of your land. And then the third thing is the statistics of your area. So is it heavy ag? Is it not heavy ag? Are you kind of out on an island on your own? So what are the statistics for your area? So what is exactly happening? Is it very predominantly agriculture or not? Next. So after you've really kind of thought about those three major questions, we go to the rule of thumb, and folks say, well, what the heck is that, Nicole? And I say, well, if you think about it, every piece of land has a value. And that value is determined again by what we talked about previous. Is there a market for your land? And what we do is we look at that land value, and we can say that traditionally land value at 2 to 3% would be your rental rate. So if you can do the math. So a $2,000 per acre land value would bring you between $40 and $60 per acre of land rental rate. Now, that obviously is going to shift and change depending upon how, going back to number one, how much in demand your land is. There's land that used to be $60 an acre 3-5 years ago, and now it's up to $150 because of the pressure in that area. And that's really where my survey is going to kind of pull things to light so that people really know and understand how we determine these rates. So the question is, well, if I don't know, how do I figure that out? Well, number one, we can look at the appraisal of the original purchase. I would not suggest you go out and get an appraisal of your land because number one, that is extremely, extremely expensive. And if you just kind of do some general look arounds through Zillow, you can go to the county and you can find out if your neighbor sold a parcel of land. You can look in the documents, the deeded documents, and you can determine how much that is. That is all public knowledge. And then you can also look at county level farm sales, go on websites, look at the realtors in your area. I don't know if everyone on here is Saratoga County, but you can look in surrounding counties, look at what the average farmland value was, and you can kind of gauge how much your rent is going to be. Utilizing that 2 to 3% of the land value for a rental rate is pretty spot on. Even post-pandemic, we've still been utilizing that 2 to 3%. Hopefully our survey will kind of keep that number in check, but we'll see. So in 2020, this is actually, I did a very small cash rent survey in 2020 with Dr. Jenny Ift, who is now out at Kansas State. She and I put together a small 8-county survey. We surveyed landowners, we surveyed appraisers, we surveyed different agencies like FSA, extension agents, soil and water, NRCS. We also sent it to the Appraisers Association, and we gathered some information for the 8 counties in our region. Again, this was in 2020, so it was height of the pandemic. They were looking at numbers for 2019, so this is a couple years old, but it kind of shows you where I'm at. So in Saratoga, our results were low, medium, and high. That's how we determined our land rental rates. Low meaning that's kind of low quality land, not very productive. Medium, cropland, mildly productive, and then our very best land. And if you notice, our rental rates went anywhere from $25 up to $87. And we base that on silage yields. So we utilize corn silage yields per acre in order to determine low versus high. So our low is only 12 tons of silage per acre versus our very good quality ground at 24 tons per acre. If you also notice, our high best rate rental rate, it's only 27% of the land that was that responded was of that excellent or high land rental rate at $87. The other way you can check this is you can go on to the NAS statistics service, and we're going to talk about that in a minute. So before I go on, does anyone have any questions? Okay, next. So the other way we can talk about that is through USDA census reporting. I'm not going to click the link because it brings up a tremendous amount of information. But if you get my PowerPoint presentation, you can click the link yourself and do the searches because it is like a black hole. It's a lot of fun to look at, and it's very interesting. But again, it's a lot to generate, and it gets a little exhausting. So if you get this PowerPoint, you'll be able to go through and do the USDA quick stats. Next. Okay, so going down through our bulletin, if you remember back to the list of things, we talk about other ownership costs that we need to consider. So the one is, and the major one is property taxes. And we talked, and Dave talked a little bit about ag assessment on the land. And we'll talk in a few moments about an RP 305 and how to actually secure that. But we need to see, is there ag assessment on the land? If there isn't, then we need to do some extra digging and some extra paperwork so that we can acquire that ag assessment on the land. Remember, property taxes are not an exemption, but they're a reduction. People think that when you have an ag assessment, they automatically assume that it's an exemption, but it's not. It's actually a reduction of your land tax. You're still going to pay tax on it. You're just going to pay a lesser amount. The next is your insurance expenses. Obviously, property insurance is very important. Rental insurance, I would say that if you had somebody renting your farm, that they should be having your property on their on their insurance policy, because the movement of their machinery to and from the fields, and then also them being on your property, if there was ever an issue, there would be some recourse, and you would be able to go to them as the renters of your property to apply to their insurance before coming to your insurance. So by allowing or having your renter have insurance through an insurance binder on your property, that will actually give you a peace of mind. Crazy things happen on the road. If you've ever noticed our big pieces of machinery going down the road and people are crazy and impatient, and they have swung out outside of tractors with implements on the back, and accidents have occurred in the past, and we just want everyone to be safe. We want landowners to be secure. We want our farm owners to be secured. So I always have folks put an insurance binder on that piece of property that they're renting, and having our non-operating landowners request that. Mortgage interest, obviously, when we're talking about ownership costs, you may have a mortgage, having that rent pay for the interest of the land. I'm not asking for those owners, those operators to pay for your principal payments, but maybe for the interest of the land, that might be a consideration. And then other non-financial objectives that you may have. And that could be a whole host of things. Next. So a few things that will change rental rates. Obviously, we've talked about the productivity of the land, whether it's a very high quality or a poor quality. You never know what's underneath the soil. So you could have, 8 inches of topsoil and then a layer of bedrock. You don't know. So non-operating landowners may not know. Our operating renters will actually gather a lot of that information. The location in which your land is. So are you very close to the farm? Are you very close to a community? Sometimes when you're really close to communities, and especially if you're in a non-agricultural, you're in a non-agricultural district, sometimes we have some issues with other property owners that may not want to deal with manure spreading or implements on the roads, or potentially mud on the road when that tractor and the implements come out of the field in the spring after a day at the farm. So location where that is could actually impact your land rental rates. Certifications, are you organic? Are you not organic? Are you just conventional? So sometimes certifications will impact the land rental rate. And then infrastructure, what's there? What's actually on the farm? Is it just an open field with some hedgerows like somebody had said, or do we have to go down a really long, narrow driveway with our big tractors and implements, pulling implements to get to the field? And you have to go past a house and barns and lots of stuff in order to get to where we're going. So we need to look at what might be impacting that. Are there low hanging power lines? You would be surprised, like things like that actually will impede somebody coming in and renting your land, because if Dave looked up and said, holy cow, that's a really low hanging power line, we have to have that fixed before we can even get in here with our tractors. Or even our, if they're making grain and they need to get trucks or carts in there, silage trucks, that could be a problem. That could be problematic. So knowing about the infrastructure, also, what are your roads like in and around? Are they dirt roads? Are you on a major highway? Are you on major roadways where we can get in and out safely and efficiently? Next. Okay, so before we move on to leases, and I'm just looking at my time, it'll be about 5 to 7 minutes of lease information. I just want to pause right there for one more minute to ask if there are any questions. Okay, so moving on to leases. Leases are extremely important. I do have some general leases that I can share with Tori and Nicolina if folks are interested. There is an RP 305C lease that you can use if you are a non-operating landowner, or like I said, I do have other options, whether it's for barns and infrastructure, or actually just land leases. So my biggest thing is making sure that you get it in writing. And what should be in that lease? So if you are identifying land or pasture or buildings or whatever, make sure that is all written into your lease agreement. You may want to add the soil and water maps, which you will need anyway for your RP 305 application, but identifying that, knowing exactly how many acres is important. So not leaving it open-ended, making sure that it is very clear is important. Next. So here is just a sample of the RP 305. This is the agricultural assessment application. It's a few pages long. What I always caution is, if you have questions, go visit with your assessor, visit with your operating renter so that they can answer questions, and then create this RP 305, which is your application. It's a few pages long, I think, I don't know, maybe 5 or 7 pages in length. And it's really important that you document everything and that you do it correctly. I will say that every single town assessor in this state is different. I have assessors that will just annually send out the RP 305 renewal, and you just have to sign it and send it in. Other folks will ask for you to go and get a new soil map, which is a cost to you through your county soil and water district. Every county soil and water district is also different with that cost. Some of them don't charge, some of them do charge. You also may have to submit all of the information every single year. Like I said, so Dave does a great job with going and visiting with the assessors, knowing exactly what they want and what they need so that he can provide that. I encourage you to do the same, because I actually had a farm change hands through death. So it was a family, dad passed away, and then the farm went into a trust. It only changed hands by paper, still stayed in the same family. And so they did not file the correct quote unquote paperwork that their assessor needed, wanted, identified, what have you. So all of their land that was under ag assessment went to a residential. And it was a huge mess for them because they had to go and make everything retroactive. And their taxes were all messed up for an entire year. So I'm forewarning you that every single assessor is very, very different. It's very important to have your RP 305 completed correctly and in its entirety. Next. So a little bit about that application. You must submit to the local assessor with the lease agreement. So you need the RP 305C or another notarized agreement. Again, specified has to be notarized. So very, very important. It must be for a minimum of 5 years. However, within that 5 years, you can have an agreement that says it's an annual renewal. So you renew it annually, but it will be for 5 years. So if for every year, maybe you increase your rate or something changes, but you need to say that it's a minimum of 5 years, and then you have an annual renewal. That's kind of the workaround instead of just a true 5-year lease agreement. You must have your soil and water map, your soil maps attached from the county soil and water district. Normally this will charge you between $20 and $30 for the map. Some soil and water districts will not charge, others do charge. So that is a cost that you will incur. Make sure your RP 305 is filled out. There's a link to it. So that's, again, a nice way. RP 305Rs, which is the renewal. So once you submit all this information, it's not going to be immediate. The way that taxes work is it will be starting in the fall, so your school taxes, and then it will be followed up with your property tax in January. And then you will submit by March 1st, your 305R, which is your renewal, so that your cycle starts again in September with your school taxes and then goes to your property taxes. Check with your local assessor to determine your tax assessment totals. I've had some people say my land tax really didn't change when I went to an agricultural assessment. It only changed a couple $100. Some people say, and it all depends on the county in which you live and the township in which you live. So again, some people say it's kind of a waste for me. I don't need to do it because it doesn't really change anything. It's more of a hassle for me. But again, check. Like I said earlier, this is not an exemption, it's a reduction. And I have had people say, oh, well, I can do this and I'll be exempt on my taxes. That's not the case. It is an actual reduction. It's not an exemption. Next. So just a few little tidbits with general land leases, who, what, where, why, and when. Making sure that you know who the parties are, the landlord and the tenant and the leasee or the leaseor. the physical address, a surveyor's map possibly attached if you have one, the length of the lease, your payments in there, who's paying the taxes, the utilities, the insurances. Typically that lands at the non-operating landowner's feet. That's what your rents pay for, and also the decrease of your tax. It's kind of the benefit. What are the permitted uses of the land? So some people will say this can only be in hay. This can only be, or it can be in hay and then it can go to corn for 1 year and then it has to go right back to hay. Some people are very specific. I've had people say, you cannot spray on this land. You can only do this, this, and this. You cannot use this type of pesticide on the land. I've seen a lot of very different variations of that. Landlord entry permission. This is extremely important. So if you have any easements on your land, or if your land is landlocked, or you have to go through somebody else's property, you need to make sure that that landlord, the person is allowed on the property. The other part is that the person in which you're renting, so the non-operating landowner, what is their permission of being on the land? So it's twofold. One, if you have any entry issues, I've had land where you've had to drive through somebody else's yard to get to the land behind it. So you need to make sure that there's a right of way. And then secondly, if the landlord is allowed on the property, even though that's being rented by somebody else. So a couple of things to think about. Who's doing the repairs and the maintenance? So if there is a culvert that is crushed by machinery, heavy machinery, who is fixing that? I always say if somebody is exiting the property when the lease is terminated, or there's a parting of ways, that the person that was renting the land, the tenant was renting the land, needs to bring it back to what it was. So if there was gravel driveways that were tore up, or like I said, culverts that were smashed, smushed, they all need to be taken care of at the exit of the property. Alterations or improvements. Some folks will tile line heavier ground, which is a cost to the tenant, but that is also an improvement on your land. So you would have to visit with them on how you're going to, how are they going to be compensated for that? Because it's tremendous expense when you tile land. Any conservation, if that's appropriate, subletting, terminable clauses. What if they default on payment? Had that happen? Monitoring and reporting, any kind of dispute resolutions. And then, of course, we always ask for an exit plan. Whenever you get into a partnership, because this is technically like a partnership, a landlord tenant kind of thing, you should always have an exit plan. Always have an exit plan. Always do that in business, have an exit plan. Next. All right, so pasture leases. I don't know if some folks may be leasing pastures, but I always like to put this in because you'd be surprised. Some people like to lease their pastures. So again, property description, any general terms of the lease. So important to include your animal units, so types and kinds. So are you just letting sheep out there? Are you goats, horses, cattle? If so, we want to make sure that the land can support the animals in which it's on and that they're not overstocking. Who is caring for those livestock? Who is watering them? Who is, what's the fencing like? Who is checking them? What happens if an animal gets sick? So it's really important to identify your operation and maintenance. Rental calculations, which I have lots of rental calculations for pasture, which we can talk about at a further time. And then, of course, the notary of public to make it all legal. Notarize, notarize, notarize. Next. So just a few things for our landowners on here. Leasing your private or public farmland helps meet your stewardship goals and increase farming opportunities. We want to make your land available for farming. So this is, I always like this kind of flow chart. Learn about issues, assess your situation and land needs, explore your options, set your terms, find your farmer, negotiate the agreement, and then monitor the relationship. All right. So, any questions? I know I kind of went through that pretty quick, but I also want to be cognizant of your time since we're 3 minutes before the bottom of the hour. Questions or comments?
Thank you, Nicole. I know we've done this, I think 2 or 3 times now, and every time I hear it and I'm familiar with it, you always bring up something more to think about. But we actually did get 2 questions in. Questions about barn leases and can you re-clarify the rule of thumb?
Okay.
And yes, you'll go ahead, do those, and then we got another couple.
Okay, so let's see here. Barn leases, Laura. Yes, so some folks will lease out barns. We have some folks that will actually lease barns for dairy. Some will lease barns for sheep or goats, but we do that on a square footage. It's not a whole lot, but I do have some information on that. If you wanted to lease your barn, we could chat about that later. For Carrie, can you re-clarify the rule of thumb? Yeah, so the rule of thumb is basically saying take the property value. So if it's traditionally, say we'll use $2,000 per acre. Okay. So if you say our land is worth $2,000 an acre, and if you use the 2 to 3% rule, the rule, it basically says that your land is valued at $40 to $50 per acre for rental fee on an annual basis. Hopefully that clarified that. So the rule of thumb basically saying, look at your land, what's the worth of it for farmland, for ag, say $2,000, multiply that by 2 to 3%, $40 to $60 per acre. Land rental rate value. Aiden, the rental rates, they are per acre per year, correct? Beth, can you define exit plan a bit more? So exit plan being, how are you going to, if you were to, I'm just trying to think of a good analogy. So if you were going to stop renting to XYZ farmer, and then you say, okay, I'm no longer going to rent to you, or maybe XYZ farmer is no longer in business. So we say, okay, they are no longer wanting to do business with us. We have to make sure that we have something in writing. Number one, that they clean up any messes. Maybe they pushed in a hedgerow that needs to be fixed and cleaned up. Maybe they squashed something, maybe the roadways, maybe they have some ruts in the field. So we need to put stuff in writing so that that land is back to what it was prior to that farmer coming in and leasing your land from you. Andy and Linda, what is the FSA stand for? So FSA is Farm Service Agency. It is a branch of the USDA. Farmers go there, and that is where we sign up all of our crops. They kind of keep tabs on us on the federal level. Anything else did I miss?
I think that's it for in the chat.
And if someone wants to open up their mic, they're more than welcome to.
No, thank you again, Nicole. I really appreciate it. This is always a good one, and it always is like popular, I think, at different times for different reasons too.
Yes.
We got one is, how can we get connected with potential renters?
That's that's an interesting question. Depends on where you are. So there is it land for lease? That also, sometimes there's websites, and Tori might be able to help more with this with Saratoga Plan and Nicolina. So they may have some programs that I'm not familiar with within your region.
I just put in the chat a link to New York Farmland Finder. If you go there, they have kind of a matching website for farmers and those who own a farm. So it kind of connects the two. So you can create a profile and match yourself up to whatever you need. And if you need help creating a profile, feel free to reach out to myself or Nicolina, and we can help you with that.
That was the exact one I was thinking of. I couldn't remember the name of it. So, yep.
No, this is really great. Yeah. And it's something we hear all the time. I know, like, a guy, he's got an agreement. He's using it for pasture, and he put up fencing and automatic water. So in his lease agreement, their exit plan discusses, you know, he was the renter and he put all that money in. So at the end of his lease, they haven't agreed, before they even went into it, they have an agreed amount. So when he's done utilizing the land, the landowner will actually reimburse him for those advancements that he made to the property, and they'll stay on the property, but he'll compensate him for that. So it's a really good agreement that they have, and it works for them.
Right. Yeah, they probably use depreciation and annual depreciation. So at the end of, say, 5 years, if it wasn't fully depreciated, they can pay the difference or something. That's
Yeah.
really a good idea. People do that a lot.
So, and then they have run-in sheds, and they made it so the run-in sheds are totally movable, so we can take them off the property and take them with them when he goes. So that was just thinking of the future and being very realistic with it, which is a good one. Thank you so much, Nicole. I really appreciate it. And Dave, thank you for your insights and information and, you know, lessons learned along the way. It's always really appreciative to have you guys come in to talk. So thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone. Sorry.
Yeah, thank you both.
This session was recorded, so I will send it to everybody who signed up, whether or not they jumped on. You guys will get a recording of this. It might be in a few days, but you will get one. And Nicole, you mentioned that I could share your PowerPoint with everybody as well.
Yep.
Okay, so I will do that. And are you okay with me sharing your email address if they have further questions?
Of course.
All
Yep.
right, I'll send that along as well. But thank you, everybody, for joining on. And if you have any more questions, feel free to send them to me and I can pass them on. And I will also pass on Nicole's contact information as well.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.
Thank you. Bye-bye.